Hello and welcome to another edition of RSF Radio. I'm your host, Joe Monday, and this is the podcast where we talk about what's been going on in the FGC over the last week or so. Today I have a very special guest. You may know him as Tanner Roubert, a.k.a. King Hippo. No, I gave it that French affectation because I had done that before. I guess I just assumed because I'd only read your name, hadn't actually heard you say it before, and you were like, actually, no, not that fancy.
Yeah, I knew, I'd take credit for it if I could, but no, it's just plain. I'm sorry, and boring.
No, that's okay. I only say it that way because I don't know if I've said this on the show before, but I actually have a liver disorder. It's a very common disorder that actually a lot of people I think have, that they might not know about it, but it's called Gilbert's syndrome. And that sounds fancy until you look at it on paper and it's just Gilbert's syndrome, which is a lot worse. So I'm used to giving things that, or just assuming.
A little French flair.
Yeah,
no,
that's
fine,
that little nicety at the end.
I mean, who doesn't, who among us doesn't do that? I go to Target.
Exactly.
I don't go to Target. I'm sorry. I don't know what, Rube's store you're going to. I go to Target. It's very high end.
Yeah, it's
the best possible Doritos and frozen treats. Let me tell you.
Yeah, the same shit. Well, I don't know. Their Target trail mix is good. It's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a decent pretzel there, I guess. I don't know.
No. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Target. We're here to talk. We're here to talk. The target of the conversation, though.
Oh, there's a few targets. Yeah.
Is oh Jesus Christ! I didn't even think about that transition. But before we get into all that, before we get into the meat of the show, of what we came here to talk about, let's get into pitch right up front. I like to let people know where they can find you on the internet, kind of what projects you have going on, so that people can't avoid it at the end of the show. We're going to throw that right up front so they can't avoid the shill. So shill all you can.
All right. Well, I'm glad you asked because I actually made a list. So I thought of, how best to describe my brand. And you can hear that. That's my legal pad here. I've written down my brand, as it were. So you can follow me at @KingHippo42. That's on Twitter. And if you follow me, this will, as the list says, there's three things. For high quality Sailor Moon and Persona shitposts, memes, and clips. You can follow me for very long-winded Twitter rants that are full 240 characters about anything that I'm thinking about at that moment. And occasionally I will get weepy about the Beatles. So if any of those three things tickle the ivories of your fancies, then please... @KingHippo42. I also have a website that is run through WordPress. It's Them's Fighting Words with 2 exclamation marks at WordPress.com. It's where I post my blog, and hasn't been updated probably in a little while, but that is where I do post my personal blog. And that's pretty much all I've got.
I didn't know you were a Beatles fan. That's not something that came across to me. I had not seen that.
Oh, massive fan.
I have to ask you, favorite album?
It's a tie. This is honest truth. It's a tie. Abbey Road and Rubber Soul.
Oh no, Revolver, man. Revolver's the correct answer.
You're asking me to pick between my children. This is what you're asking me, and I can't. It's hard to do it. I might Beatles for Sale. I could probably take out back and give elbow it in the neck or something. But a lot of those other ones, I just can't do it. So it's really hard. I actually did a thread on Twitter of all my favorite Beatles songs from each album.
Fair enough.
So and that took me 2 hours of my life, and it's stuff I'll never get back. So. You can tell I'm really, I really got nothing going on. So let's continue with this exciting interview.
Well, no, for all the Zoomers out there who might not know or actually have listened to, because that's the thing, is that I hadn't actually listened to a full Beatles album until much later in my life, where I was like, that's because all you know about are the hits growing up.
You do. And then my thing was, so I got into Beatles when I was in high school, and I was playing Beatles Rock Band. And it occurred to me as I was playing, and see, it worked. So harmonics, if you did one thing right, it was Beatles Rock Band. what occurred to me was how many of those hits I didn't realize were the Beatles and that they all were grouped together. Like, it was nuts. I would think, I know this song, and then it's like, oh, that's also the Beatles. It's like, what?
And like some of their experimental stuff, or like what they did with recording back in the day, was like, oh man, this is further out than I anticipated that a rock band could be at this time.
In the 60s, yeah. I mean, it's old hat now. All of it is old hat now, which is why that movie that came out where it's like the guy discovers the Beatles and he's the only one that knows the Beatles. I'm like, why would that work in the modern age? All this stuff has been done, but maybe it wouldn't. So that's, and I mean, that really draws you in, because they get a bad rap as technically poor musicians, and I think that's not fair.
Fair enough. I always like the interview question of someone asking Paul McCartney, is Ringo Starr the best drummer in the world? And his response was, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
That's yeah. I mean, and he did his job, his workmanlike job. That's all he did. He also said A Hard Day's Night, which contributed to the naming of the eponymous song. So I give Ringo some slack.
Okay,
also, Octopus Garden, secret banger.
I think you're the only one who
I'll die
has
on that
opinion, and I'll let you have. I'm not going to fight you on that. You can.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
I'm
going to die on that particular hill.
Okay, but we're not here to talk about Beatles stuff, unless you want to get into a fight over. Yeah, well, I don't know who can say really. I have no idea what the demographic is of this. That's actually I don't know age.
How many 60 to 75-year-olds? Because I'm sure they're thrilled.
I don't know the answer to that. If you find yourself in that
it's time to tune up those analytics, boy. Because let me tell you, you're missing out on a key demographic. I can use these words in sentences, and they make me sound smart.
Surely. No. Anyway, no, we're here to talk about fighting game stuff.
Oh yeah, those. Yeah, what are those? Yeah.
It's something that happened last weekend, maybe. If you're listening to this chronologically, Canada Cup just happened, 2019. Canada Cup is still a premier tournament, which is
that's an interesting one.
That's a thing that you can say, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone. So I'm not trying to say that anyone who is doing work at Canada Cup is trash. I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum here if they enjoy. And from all reports, it seemed like everyone had a really good time this year at Canada Cup, which was in Calgary, versus what it was last year in Toronto, and it was tied up with the
traditionally
Gaming Expo.
In Calgary, as far as I know, too.
Correct. Yeah.
Traditionally, yeah.
They went back to their roots this year.
Yes. Yes.
And so I don't know. It looked like it was run a little bit better, but the one thing I do want to pull out is that Ben Q, speaking of pulling out, they seem to have pulled out at the the last minute, and they just didn't show up with any of the equipment that they were supposed to. And this is not the first time that they've done this.
It's certainly not. So with Ben Q, this also happened at Celtic Throwdown, where at the last minute they were told that they were not going to have their monitors, and I don't remember. I know at Canada Cup, Ben Q did end up pulling through late, but eventually, I don't know the Celtic Throwdown.
Zowie stepped up.
Okay.
No, it was. Oh shit! Was it Zowie or was it Asus?
I thought it was Asus.
It was Asus. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was remembering that incorrectly. Anyway, not important. I mean, it is important because
somebody pulled through is the thing. But and also I've heard that this has also happened in some Latin American tournaments and some other smaller tournaments. It's not much publicized, but the same thing happened where Ben Q has not really gone through with their commitment in a timely manner.
Which becomes an issue when you consider that BenQ is the official monitor of the Capcom Pro Tour. One would think that maybe a little extra effort would be put towards helping out with those events.
You would think.
One would think. I don't know. I don't run that business. That's not for me to say. Yeah. But it seemed, to me at least, this year seems like they've been really slacking in that department, and maybe Capcom looks for another company to be the official monitor of the CPT, perhaps.
Well, that would certainly be the best way to do it, I think. And Joe, in my line of, I guess you could say work, more like I would say a hobby. I've looked into a lot of these, esports tours and how they're run and the kind of voodoo economics that sort of go behind them. And one of the things that really astonishes me is that even with, a decent budget put into them and people that, it seems well run on the surface, there are a lot of things that can just go badly wrong. And you can just hope they fix it the next time. I actually wrote an article about the Injustice 2 Pro Tour, I think, which had an official name, and it might have been Injustice 2 Pro League. So this was done in 2017. Yeah, 2017 when the game first came out, that first year. Mm-hmm. And there was massive inconsistencies. It was released without knowledge of when the European, or without the dates for the European sections of the tour. It was only released in the fine print of like a Samsung, because it was partnered with Samsung. There was a sweepstakes you could enter, and that revealed that the grand finals was not going to be the same place it had been for Mortal Kombat. It was in fact going to be in Chicago, but nobody knew that ahead of time, or at least it wasn't announced like in a big formal announcement, other than buried in kind of fine print somewhere. And then there was also an incident in which there was a tournament for Europe that took place online, and there are two relatively well-known players named Shark Teeth and Tekken Master, both of who are from Bahrain, which is in the Middle East. Was not considered a European place that you could enter the tournament from.
Right.
Now,
an eligible region, or whatever they make it.
Now, their sponsor, which I think is the Nasser, I believe the name is.
Yes, correct.
Argued that, these are very important players. They don't have a chance in the Middle East to attend one of these things, and the closest thing they have is this European Cup. We really would like you to make an exception. Eventually, the people that run the Injustice 2 Pro League, which I believe is a Chicago-based firm called Intersport, does like the managerial part of it. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong on. I don't think I'm wrong on that one. It's Intersport that mainly runs it. NRS obviously foots the bill, and Warner Brothers and AT&T, I guess, by proxy. So what ended up happening was that Shark Teeth and Tekken Master flew to Turkey, which is closer to Europe. Not exactly. A lot of people wouldn't consider it Europe, but it's close. And they played in the online European Cup. Some players did have a problem with it, but in the interest of fairness, everyone could have agreed that maybe it was the right thing to do. Maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, they announced the Intercontinental Online wing of the Injustice 2 Pro League, which included the Middle East and parts of Australia. Now, one would think, well, if you knew there was going to be a Middle Eastern portion, why go through all this this hullabaloo, this foo-fa-ra, to get these two to play when you knew something was coming up in the pipeline? Or did you not know and you just made it up? I don't know. We'll never get the answer to that. It's just a question I have. But it's just an example of one of these ways in which these things happen, these weird business things and inconsistencies, and nobody really is asking the questions. It's just, well, I guess that's how it is until they fix it. So with BenQ, maybe this is a thing where they're not actually, because, and if you think about it too, I don't want to put the whole blame on the organizers themselves, but I did talk to someone who kind of works in the logistics part of shipping out monitors and things, and they wondered how a business or something that was a serious business that was needing those monitors, how this wasn't hammered down maybe a couple days before, and at the last minute everybody's got their hair on fire, because it really shouldn't. It's one of those things that shouldn't happen, because they can redirect the monitors they've shipped to somewhere else. It's just a lot of, there's a lot of red tape involved. So you would think that all this would be resolved not the day of the first day of the tournament, but
right. Like how many things actually have to go wrong before you end up not having what you need day of?
Yes, exactly. Is this BenQ just being bastards, or is this, communication breakdown between several parties? It could be one or the other. I tend to lean towards the latter, because that's what I see constantly, is just these breakdowns in communication from people who just aren't that serious. And when I mean serious is that their intentions may be serious, but their when
it comes to execution,
their execution, yes, is not very serious. Yes.
Or like it's like big dreams but no follow through.
No follow through, or you lack the sense to really do it. You can talk your way into it, sure enough, but when it comes down to it, and like I said, it could be either or. This is my opinion that it's probably a little bit of the latter, because I would imagine Capcom would not want their official tour again if they care that much, because I kind of doubt it sometimes.
Well, I don't know.
And that's not to slag the people that work there. There's some great people that work there. I think Carolyn Dow's fantastic.
Hell of agree with that. She's one of the best things to happen to that side of the business for a long time.
I don't know if Hans still works there, but he was good.
No.
I don't want to talk about Michael Martin, but aside from that, I like the people that work there, and sometimes it just seems like there's not a lot of seriousness that goes into it. Like I did write a big article too about how bad and this was a while ago, and it's changed since then. I have agreed the 2019 tour was for the better, but the changes from 2017 and 2018 I thought were really quite poor, and I don't know who advised them on it other than well, we really just needed to seem more prestige, so we need to make sure tournaments happen in these places and this amount of points is worth it, and not so much this many points. And now it's all, and again, it's all sort of working as they go. I'm sure this is all, I'm sure it's the job of like two people, right?
It honestly kind of feels that way a lot of the time, that a lot of the pre-planning and like the whole entire schedule seems like it might be like a one-person job, honestly.
Or it's farmed out. Like I know One Frame Link did like the schedule.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so it's, again, the more you add to the pot, the less of a stew this is going to be. This is not a Arrested Development. You got a stew going. This is more of a sort of odd concoction that no one really wants, but it works in the in the interim. So
yeah. Now I've kind of always felt that way about the online ranking events, just because I've run an online tournament for years.
A decent while.
For quite some time.
Yeah.
And just seeing how things are run year after year, and knowing everyone's response to those tournaments is just like, it boggles the mind, man. And
sometimes, yeah.
And just knowing like how Smash GG is run, and how so many people take such umbrage with that being a terrible user experience. I don't know.
I've had some issues.
It's like, I've said this before, I think, but that, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but the image of I think this is an actual product, but it's that Swiss Army knife that has like 1,000 tools in it, or like 100 or so tools. And it's just this like massive brick that has like these two little red bits at the end. And just like thinking about that of like, man, it can do so much. But then when you think about actually using a thing that is like a foot long, because it has so many tools fucking jammed into it.
Yeah, I'd really like to just do these 2 or 3 things really well, and then
it just becomes a little bit cumbersome, let's say, even though it is technically capable of doing so much, which that system totally is. It just, when you go to use the pliers, it's a bad experience. But anyway, but no, other than that, it seems like Canada Cup this year was basically a success. I feel a little bad for Ceroblast with the OCV, and then
Daigo really took the thunder out of that one.
It's like I don't know why I don't know why I thought about this, but like that whole situation reminded me of that the older Chappelle joke of the president, and you never figured that someone's so famous until someone sucked their dick and then they became famous. I was like, is this
Mr. President
similar
situation? Sucking the ambassador's dick.
Which that's a great set from him. Say what you will about his current stand-up, but anyway,
yeah, it's classic.
It's a classic bit, but it just kind of reminded me of like, man, people are like getting all hype about Daigo's reaction to this thing. It's like, wait a minute, Sero completely destroyed everybody. Yes,
yeah. I mean, that's how it goes, you know. And when you got to clip a moment, and it's Daigo who is sometimes stoic to a fault, and everyone loves when Daigo lets his. He looks like a newly hatched chick. His hair, just perfectly coiffed and fuzzy. When it gets let down, everyone wants to see it. If he's karaokeing, that's going to get 10,000 views immediately. It doesn't matter how he did in the tournament. So I do feel bad for Sarah Blast. You're right, but a lot of people want to see Daigo act like a fool. So.
What can you do? But anyway, that was Canada Cup. Any other thoughts on Canada Cup?
Well, and just one last thing about Canada Cup is that I've been very critical of Canada Cup, and I wouldn't say that the running of the tournament, which in past years has not been particularly well, and they've made some improvements here and there, and I've kind of talked about though, like my problem with Canada Cup is more ideological. It's more Canada Cup kind of went into this mode where it went from like a really kind of more of like a broad major like we would think of to it really started to be it certainly wanted to cultivate this feel of a high roller elite event with like only the best players. I would argue they've certainly cultivated that feeling definitely in the latter half of Street Fighter 4 going to Street Fighter 5, and now you have it where we have Instagram models, and we have Shang Tsung and Liu Kang and the original Dragon Ball voice actors that everybody wanted to see. And I just feel like these are the thing. And Lapchi has talked about how he wants to have VIP sections and limos and this stuff. I just feel like it caters to a sort of weird bouginess that I feel is antithetical to what I believe the FGC to kind of revolve around and who kind of plays fighting games. But like I said, it's an ideological difference more than I don't think they're capable. And I've also had my criticisms about his own cryptocurrency expenditors, which I didn't think much of.
Really haven't talked about that yet, which is really its own thing. That is just another notch in the belt of failed experiments within the FGC.
Well, as you know, with all cryptocurrency expenditures, the main thing that you want to look out for, or the main thing that shows that it's very, very legitimate, is that when it first opens up for buy, one person buys everything and they sell out, and then they have to go, well, you got to come back for the next round. Somebody just believed in the vision and bought everything. Which is very on the up and up and is in no way a common tactic that everybody does to make it look like this Wild West bullshit actually matters. But, that's neither here nor there. But I have, my criticisms about that. And I think that is more where my criticism comes from. I recognize that it sometimes is not popular to say I have an ideological difference with you, which is why I don't want him to fail in the sense of like, I don't want him to go like broke or homeless. So that'd be terrible. That's a terrible thing. But I do feel like he's in the business for himself in a sense of like, he wants his tournament to look like I'm spending a lot of money on it and this is important. And I think that weirds people out. And you can look at, I know Canada Cup this year didn't have a great turnout. It was better probably than the pre-reg numbers looked like, because the pre-reg numbers were not very good, but I'm sure in the end it kind of pulled out to a decent one. But I think that you can kind of tell that people, especially after last year, were seeing that they were making these moves really based on getting the brand out there, and not was it about the players so much? Or was it about making it cool, and the brand is cool and Canada Cup and all this stuff? It's a very strange thing. I don't see a lot of tournaments. Well, like Evo does it too, but Evo has also got a way bigger legacy. And frankly, they should be criticized all the same. I have the same criticisms, but that is where of my, I don't wish anyone to go there and have a terrible time and laugh at them for doing so. But I do also know that there were people that were going to go regardless, because it is a premier event, and it is always going to have the benefit of the doubt, because Lapchi's an FGC good old boy at this point. He's not gonna have one or two bad events and then people will just not go to his tournaments anymore. He's always gonna have tournaments that are attended by the most well-known and given, a lot of credence to by the very high level people or the very influential people, because that's just how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair? I don't know, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, you're not wrong when you say when people say and the Illuminati, it's not exactly.
Yeah,
it's not really that far off.
No,
really.
I had a mutual friend on Twitter named Paul, and he referred to what a lot of the older members of the scene they have this weird omerta element to them. Omerta is a term from Godfather, which is like the mob's silence on their illicit activities or what goes on. He was joking, but it is kind of sometimes, because because anything about the Illuminati is always like a trash conspiracy, because it's also just blatant. If it was so secret, it would be a secret. We wouldn't know about it, but it's just blatant.
Right.
And like I said, you could look at a tournament like Defend the North had a really bad year, right? They had that tournament where they got the medals that looked like they were chipped off the Statue of Liberty's foot, and they had a really bad I think an air conditioner situation, and they had a really bad setups and things like that, and they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I feel like no one's going to think about Defend the North 2020, and Alex Valle is going to run in, and he's going to do this babyface run in and save the tournament by running it. So I don't think that's going to happen. Would it happen to Canada Cup? Absolutely would. Absolutely would. Is that fair? Who's to say?
Right.
I have my opinion, but you know what? I just want to put that out there.
No, that's not necessarily unfounded, I don't think. But all right. Well, anyway, speaking of not really good old boys, because it's kind of a Niners situation.
It really is, yeah.
However, so information has come to light in terms of the infiltration domestic abuse case. So just kind of forewarning, for the next couple minutes or so, we're going to be talking about domestic abuse. So if that's something that bothers you in any way, maybe skip ahead a little bit. But the thing about this that I thought was a little bit, I guess it's not, I was going to say surprising, but it's not really surprising, is that it doesn't seem to, this new information doesn't seem to have picked up anywhere. It seemed to have come out, and there was no reporting on it. Nobody was really even talking about it. Certainly none of the big figureheads of the community were talking about it, because of course they won't. That just is in line. That makes sense with everything. But anyway, do you kind of want to go over the article that came out and the translation of it? Because it wasn't just I'm under the impression that you had someone help you translate it and figure out what was going on here.
Well, and that's certainly true. So, Joe, before I talk about this, I kind of want to explain how it came to be that I talk about this all the time, because I certainly wouldn't like to. It's a very bad subject. But here's the reality. When I started writing my blog, it's about 2017, I really tended to focus on what I called FGC foibles, which was things that were, they were annoying and dumb, but ultimately it was just harmful. And, it was annoying. I talked about Video X Games 2013, which was like a travesty and nobody got paid. And it was just this, scam for tourism. But it wasn't, it was things and community squabbles and the NRS community and that kind of thing. Just things that were kind of annoying and funny to me. But in 2018, I kind of took this bend toward looking at what I would consider smaller minority voices in the FGC and kind of looking at their experience in a new light. And I do have to credit a couple people. The old saying is that nothing great ever gets done alone, but only one person gets the credit. And this is certainly true in this case. So over the years, I've come to know a lot of people because of the FGC, but two in particular helped me kind of settle into this new role of looking at how we treat certain groups in the FGC. And one of them is my friend Amanda, who you and many of the listeners possibly might know as Romanova. She's a commentator. She recently did Dragon Ball FighterZ at First Attack in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a community manager at High Risk Studios, who makes the game Paladins, which is a first-person shooter. And we first met at a comic book convention in 2017, and I got to know her really well, and I'd consider her one of my best friends. And as a person who is in the FGC and likes to play the games, but also likes to cosplay and commentate, she's very good at cosplay and very good at commentary. Her experiences in the FGC, I noticed, were profoundly different from what I had kind of expected as the norm. And I kind of got the feeling that, for women, it wasn't always so great. But it really, in getting to know Amanda as a person, it really came to light to me how sometimes it has a real darker side to it, and it can get pretty ugly. The other person I really want to credit is Stephanie Brownback, who, again, you and the listeners might know is the QA lead for NetherRealm Studios, who's worked on all their titles, frequently on the stream when they do Combat Cast for Mortal Kombat 11. And I've known her since about 2011. And, she really just in 2018, 2019, started to live her life the way she always wanted to. And I started to notice the experience of someone who would do that, who would, transition publicly, really enlightened me about, and she told me once, that it changed the way she looks at a lot of things too. And it certainly did for me, about the way maybe we think about the trans community, and how even in the FGC, when there are many public trans figures that are very well renowned, very well respected, it's not great for people who maybe aren't in the, are there by legacy. And so knowing that, I started sort of drifting into looking at these situations of, unfair treatment, and, looking at how the trans community might operate, how women might have a harder time in the FGC. And so when this infiltration thing first broke, this is probably like September of last year, I think.
Before you go on, I want to say that Amanda was on the show before.
Oh, was she? Okay.
Like over a year ago.
Okay.
And it actually turns out that her and I went to high school together at some point.
Oh my God.
There was a year where we went to the same high school, which
Small world.
We had only found that out like years after it would have mattered. It was just a little funny coincidence of how small the world is sometimes. But
the FGC world is terrifically small. Yeah, I learn these little coincidences all the time too.
It's very strange, but anyway, go on. I just had a little interrupt there. Go back, look through the history. That show is in there somewhere.
A little bit of levity probably needed at some points. So when the infiltration thing first broke, like many people, I kind of felt that these kind of things don't happen as seriously with what we now know to be a third party, completely unrelated to both groups, releasing this information. I had a feeling that this information, maybe not every one of it was 100% on the dot, but I bet a lot of this is true. And if it is, this is bad. This is real bad. And somebody's got to do something, right? Well, we waited and we waited. And it was a few months. I can't remember the exact how long it was exactly, but Panda Global did what they said was their responsibility to the community to investigate the matter, and they released that investigation document. And at the time I had this opinion, and sadly a year later I think I was proven right, sadly, that that document, all that did was clear his name. Ultimately is what it did.
It was one of those things where it could be, which as Panda Global, as a company that has to maintain business and maintain business relationships with people, when they released that document and the attached video, which I actually think the video is important to watch as well, that was released at the same time but harder to find, was okay. It makes sense as to why they would have taken so much time and formulated a response that quote unquote detailed. And I use quotes there because there are because it only isn't detailed in the ways where information could be construed the way, like, if you want to look at it one way,
some matter certainly may have occurred.
Yeah,
that is what, that definitely something may have or may have not happened, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it kind of is up to the reader in terms of how they want to interpret it, which
sure.
It's
dangerous
is, sure. And then also you have to consider the actual, like, legality and laws of South Korea, where what is the word for it? Like true defamation or something like that.
Truthful libel.
Yeah, truthful libel, which is like
an oxymoron. But
excuse, won't get into that one. But so anyway, at least that was my take. At the time, I was like, okay, this is good that they have done the work, but in your opinion, that might not be the case so much.
Well, so here's the thing. At the time, I mean, even now, this is above and beyond what any other organization would do. Absolutely. I mean, and they have the resources to do it. So that definitely comes into play. So in that sense, it was good. But when you look at like the fine print and you see that, so they were working with counsel on their side, counsel in South Korea, Infiltration's counsel in South Korea, Capcom's legal counsel. There is a key party missing in that equation. That is the counsel of who I'm going to refer to as Miss X. According to the Panda Global video by Dr. Benet, he said that we reached out for contact and we got no response. Miss X tweeted, "Who did you reach out to?" and said fibber, which, if you don't know, fib is, well, I guess some listeners probably will know that a fib is, a lie, or that you're lying. So we have one side says we reached out, got no contact. One side says I never got contacted. Now, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question. Is there a legal reason? Because as we now know, she was being sued for truthful libel. Is there a reason why she couldn't contact and tell her truth to a third-party organization? Is there a reason why maybe legally that her legal counsel and his legal counsel could not work together on this situation? I don't know the answer. I just want to ask the question because we don't have an answer. And what it leads to is that you really get one side of the situation and the other side is a mysterious third party who, again, we now know had no contact with either side, releasing these documents that they got a hold of. And I really feel like when you look at what they put, there are a lot of problems. One, for example, if you remember, the way the document is set up is that left side is allegations, right side is facts. So the idea kind of is as you read from left to right, as you normally would, you're seeing the untruth or maybe the half truth, and you're going to get the full truth on the right side. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, that's about how the document was set up.
How it was set up. Okay, so when you look at, say, the first allegation is in late 2017, player assaulted his then wife. We know that to be true. This is a factual statement, right? When you look over at the facts section on the other side, it says, on October 22nd, 2017, an altercation occurred between player and Miss X following a discussion regarding ending their relationship. He did not contest the claim made against him at the time, which he attests was on police recommendation, was issued a temporary restraining order. Police report related to this incident could not be accessed. Now, when you put all that together and also feel the need to add what they were discussing, it kind of feels like, and again, this may not have been their intention, and I do cite inexperience at handling this kind of thing as a major factor in a lot of these problems.
That is something that I kind of want to pull out too, because I feel like sometimes whenever we all talk about big situations like this and big PR moves like this, like the FG, it's very player forward. Like you have a lot of emotions and people out there saying whatever the fuck they want, and no one is trained in PR. A lot of the startups that a lot of the companies that are around that run
have no PR.
Have basically no PR. So like there really isn't that much experience in this, and a lot of people talking out their ass, which I just want to kind of set the stage that way. That's
certainly true. Like, and that's why I wanted to mention that, because I do feel, like I said, I don't attribute malice to this so much as inexperience, but also we're looking out for ourselves and the person we may or may not have represented, and maybe not the victim. Okay, so when you frame it in the sense of this is an allegation, player assaulted his then wife, and then here is the truth, you start to muddle, or obfuscate is the word I would use, what the actual truth is. And if you go down the line, there's a lot of things like this. For example, they wanted to list every cockamamie scheme or lie that this third party attributed, which is included embezzlement. It included a couple other things of allegations of cheating or all that kind of stuff, unfaithfulness, which was all easily proven to be false. But I think when you kind of and it's in very plain language, and it's not like it's color coded or anything like that. I think it all starts to run together as, oh, all of this was kind of maybe true, but not all of it was true. So, and the most egregious, I would say, is that there is a line where it says, the allegation is that Miss X was worried for her safety following the incident. And the truth side says, Miss X made repeated attempts to contact the player. The messages include requests that player not pursue divorce and other statements showing concern for player's well-being, which would imply that if you do that, you're not scared for your life and you're not a victim. Which again puts into question her motives. It then puts the question forward that this is not what it appears to be. Here's the problem. If their idea is they're taking a neutral stance, well, unfortunately, with their language, they have sided with the tormentor, because domestic abuse, as we all know, as we should know, maybe we don't all know, but we should know, it is not just physical violence. It's also mental abuse. It's gaslighting. It's a lot of other things that make a relationship deeply, deeply toxic. So when you look at something like that and say, oh, well, she obviously wasn't worried for her life if she was texting him, it's a real dangerous thing. A lot of victims have to go through that when they actually go to court for it, or when they try to go to the police. They have to be told, you're not actually scared if you're doing this, when it's like, maybe I am.
That is a common legal defensive tactic for abusers to take. Just for like a little frame of reference, maybe like watch some Law and Order SVU, and they'll be like, well, you texted your supposed rapist, so that can't, you must actually care about this person. It couldn't have been rape. Similar situation like that, of like the mental stress that goes along with something like that is not to be taken dismissed as fact, or like this is how this person felt because they responded this way. Right. Because just studies show that is often not the case, or not true.
Sure, absolutely. So when you put this stuff together, it creates this sort of picture of they're not really looking out for the victim. And the truth is, they don't have her side of the story because they weren't able to contact her. And again, I don't know the reasons. I'm putting some questions out there. Maybe someone has the answers. Maybe someone who's because I want to put out there, I'm certainly not an expert even on United States law, let alone the law of another nation. So if someone knows maybe reason why someone couldn't contact it, that's fine. But it's always allegations, and then this is what happened. So it paints this picture of that it's exaggerated, that this didn't happen the way we think it did. Even when there was, transcripts that came out that included some language that I would find very disturbing, monstrous, frankly. Threatening someone's life. And it's bullshit. It didn't happen that way, because they also had mentioned that the transcripts that a lot of people saw was presented out of order. Now, what that means is that what you saw, if you saw, 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, it may have been this is page 16, and then we cut to page 19, and then we cut to page 21. For some reason, you'll see a lot of people say, oh, that means it was tampered with. It was tampered with. So now it's inadmissible. Or, because, people think they know the law because they watch Law and Order, as you might have suggested. But that's not really how these things go. They also, a lot of people like to, and when I say a lot of people, I mean like reply guys on Twitter. So I want to clarify, I'm referring to like the worst of the internet here, but it's annoying because that's what you see. And they make mention of the fact that these recordings were not submitted to a trial. And again, we know there was no trial. He confessed. So they had a court hearing where a judge read the sentence, and that was it, because he confessed, because they looked at the police transcript and they said, oh, here's a confession, here's your sentence, goodbye. You don't present evidence in that case. No one's arguing for or against it. So there was no reason to present this recording.
But Tanner, the police coerced a confession out of him.
Oh, well, they certainly did. So let's get back. So my point with that is that I think the PG report, as well-intentioned as it might have been, is coached in so much legalese and is clearly very carefully put together by a series of lawyers who were sympathetic to the cause of the tormentor and not the tormented. It then becomes that document isn't really neutral. It's adding to this conspiracy theory. And I think it's really important to mention too that afterwards, Infiltration's, they also decided to let him have a response, because if you remember the original tweet chain, it's here's our findings document, here's the video. Oh, and Infiltration asked us to release this statement where he says it's all bullshit and I'm going to fight it and clear my name. And they also mentioned that he intends to clear his name. So again, you've given the tormentor his case, his pause, his word, and silence on the other side. Again, all very, very dangerous for the tormented. But, I guess this wasn't a real big consideration. Now, do I think you should nail PG to the pole? No. Do I think they need to be somewhat held accountable for why the public consciousness around this is so that it was exaggerated and not true? Absolutely. And it's, you know what? Maybe it's not anybody's particular fault. Maybe it's the fault of inexperience, the fault of a difficult situation between two different countries where you had to translate and a bunch of other things. But the reality is now we are at the point where two articles came out. And this is, again, a long story to get back to my original point, or your original question. So there were two articles that came out within a week of each other in the past month, both from the Korean Economic Daily, which is at the website hangkyung.com. This is a paper. This is a private-owned paper, so it's a corporatized paper, but it's a legitimate newspaper. This isn't something, if you get, especially in South Korea, where we know that libel laws can get really dicey really quick.
Is this the InfoWars of South Korea?
What's that?
Is this the InfoWars of South Korea?
It is not.
Okay.
They're not talking about chemtrails and all this other stuff.
Will this paper turn the frogs gay?
I can't say that for sure.
Okay, I just have to check.
But we're gonna defeat these anti-human scum.
That was actually that was don't do that again. That was too good. That was a little. I got. You have frightened me, actually.
I know. I'm trying to bring some levity here. This is a really heavy subject, so I'm sorry, but
that was a really good impression.
Thank you. I've been told I do good voices. So now let's get back to the Korean Economic Daily. So this is a very legitimate newspaper. It came out with an interview with Miss X. So in the interim between the PG report and now, all we've had is Infiltration doing streams where he's yelling at his chat about conspiracy, about how she's trying to ruin his life, that her feminist ways, that's a quote, have influenced her to ruin his life. He even made a long tweet thread where he said, I do not intend to pursue those who had personally insulted or made slanderous remarks toward me. However, it has come to my attention that there are still individuals who are attacking me and making a mockery of me. Furthermore, I've discovered that these individuals and their friends have been making countless attempts to damage my reputation within the community. From here on, I will no longer be ignoring such slanders. I will give these individuals one last chance to contact me for an apology. If you spread remarks that damage my reputation, I'd like for you to contact me. Not that it matters if you don't. I'm well aware of who you are, your names, your real name, your nicknames, your real names, and your faces. If you believe you can weather the storm that will result from ignoring this opportunity, you do as you wish. This is the last time I will be forgiving those whose actions resulted in my defamation. I imagine these will ring a bell for aforementioned individuals. That's a threat. by any stretch of the imagination.
No, that's not. What in that? Show me the threat. Point, underline it. Did he?
Well, so yeah. Again, who's to say he's threatening people? But
who's to say?
But so this is the kind of
elaborate threat.
This is kind of the thing he's been doing for the past year. And his wife, the only thing that we have is that on Twitter, she politely asked that everyone please stop sharing these leaked items because his lawyers told me they can make this very difficult for me. The implication being that as far as, libel and defamation goes, she was in a lot of trouble over this, right? Over these leaked documents. Because if you remember correctly, this all happened in 2017, not 2018. So this is already a year old by the time it actually came out.
Right.
So she was in a lot of trouble over that. And then he did an interview with IGN Korea, which is, in the hallowed records of papers or news sites, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Times, IGN Korea, all these, in the hallowed, levels of news halls. This is top tier journalism. Okay. So IGN Korea does an interview with Infiltration where he lays out his long-winded explanation of what happened, which he says is, well, you know what? I was trying to divorce her. And she said no, and then I thought she got her phone. I thought she was calling the cops on me. So I grabbed her, tried to grab her phone. I grabbed her wrist. And, you say things in the heat of the moment. Everybody gets heated, say some things we don't like. We threaten people's lives. We'd say we're choking them, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, long story short, cops pull me in, throw some trumped up charges at me. I don't know what's happening. I'm scared. And they're saying, you do this or you're going to go to prison. You confess. Please just take the easy road out. This is the only chance you have. You don't have lawyer, you don't have counsel. And he's feeling really scared and he doesn't want to do it, but he's, damn it, he signs it anyway. And he takes the fine. But you know what? He's been told after 2 years, this will all be cleared. This is so minor that after 2 years, his record will be expunged and he'll be able to go on doing his gaming career and all that. So that's his story. That was in IGN Korea. So then the Korean Economic Daily posts a interview with his ex, Miss X, where she tells a bit of a different story, to say the least. She is now suing him for defamation through false information, harassment, and obstruction of her business. And the way she tells it is that the night of, he was asking for a divorce, and she said that at the time she was afraid of getting divorced and didn't really want to, so she said no. And he began throwing monitors and trophies and other objects, violently breaking them. She called the police. The police showed up, gave him a warning and said, you got to stop this. Took pictures and left. And when the police left, he took her phone from her and took her down to the floor and dragged her around. And she said he choked her. And she said this went on for a while, and she was able to record it, a recorder she uses for her work. And every time she tried to leave, he would drag her back. So she maintained that when the police were finally called, which was by a neighbor, they showed up, and that her clothes were all torn away because of the intensity of the dragging. And that's the paramedics had to take her away by putting her clothes back on her to make her decent. And when she went to the hospital, she was actually diagnosed with inflammation of the wrist and bruising all over her body from the dragging and the strangling. So she got like tendonitis, basically, kind of from the damage. Okay. And after the police arrested Infiltration, the police who arrested him are actually quite perturbed because he said that they lied and threatened him so he would falsely admit to the crime. Even though he didn't do it, he would admit to it to clear his name. They are now seriously considering suing him because that is defaming them, because they said that that is not what we did. There's a transcript that can show that is not that what we did. As for her, the reason she said she didn't submit it was because, again, there wasn't an actual trial. However, now that I'm suing him for false information, I can present these facts as well as my medical, the medical paper I have, which I can also produce because now there is an actual trial that I need to present these. She also said he lied to, you know, remember that Twitter rant where he said, I wasn't going to consider it, but if you apologize, I won't do it. Mm-hmm. Well, he actually did do it. So he ended up suing a couple Korean FGC forums for defamation by truth. He sued her and about 8 others from online websites that were kind of talking about the situation. He said that it was a conspiracy, that they had conspired to ruin his life. They didn't like him, so they decided to go all in on this lie. Judge dismissed that lawsuit because he alleged that she paid off the people to spread his record. The judge wrote in his ruling that there is no connection between the ex-wife and any of those individuals. Everyone is not guilty. There was no leaks on their part. So she is suing him for that. So the picture gets even worse when a week later there's yet another article released. This is also by the Korean Economic Daily, where he again is caught in a bit of a lie here. They go over what he said was his punishment, which was a fine of about $600 USD, and that he said in 2 years his record will be expunged. Well, this paper did the legwork, and they said there is no law or there is no way you could get a sentence and it's just gone after 2 years. That just doesn't exist. That's not a thing that happens. And they confirmed also that the police are interested in, possible legal action, because they also said that in the way our courts work is that a judge reads the police transcript that they give him and he puts the sentence forward. The police cannot tell you what the sentence is. They can't tell you what exactly, like if your record will be expunged. They don't know. They have no way of knowing that, or if that's not a real thing. So now, far be it from me to trust, things a cop would say. As we know,
are you going to trust the cops? Are you going to trust what the cops say?
All cops are bad. This is true. At the same time, and this is not to slander the entire country of South Korea. These are just facts. Okay. South Korea has a very high domestic violence rate. The situation is thought of as profoundly differently than we would here in the United States, for sure. A lot of these things are considered familial disputes that don't need to be handled in courts. So a lot of times they don't actually go to court. Furthermore, as we also know, that in most domestic abuse situations here stateside, a lot of times it's very difficult for the victim to get any footing, because they either aren't believed or the judge doesn't think they're telling the truth. Domestic violence accusations that are false, very, very small. That actually go to court, and are written up as false, because that's all we can have. Anybody could accuse anybody of something. But, if the official information, when we talk about like fake rape assaults and fake accusations, it accounts to about roughly couple percent. It's not a whole lot.
I think I've looked into it before, and I think back in I think it was like 2010. I could be getting this wrong. I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass. I know I've said them on this show before, but I think it was like 2010. It was somewhere below like 3%.
Yes, it's a very small rate. So, and to go to all the trouble,
and then the numbers of those false accusations that end in convictions is even smaller than that.
Yeah, and even further, most false accusations are done by people who are career criminals. They're either guilty of also large scale theft, maybe some other crimes. So the conspiracy that's painted is that the state of South Korea, the police force in South Korea, his wife, who is, as far as I know, sort of just a layman of no real renown or maybe no ties to a really famous family in South Korea, and gaming websites and all this have conspired to ruin infiltration, like Daredevil in the story Born Again by Frank Miller. Well, that was a comic book. And as such, that level
pool.
Yeah. As such, that level of conspiracy is, let's constrain that to comic books and fantasy.
Okay.
The amount of coincidences that would have to be true for his conspiracy theory to be not just another lie of several that he's told is way too high at this point. And, you know, again, a big problem with it is that these articles aren't officially translated in a lot of ways. I've worked with somebody to help get it translated. And that's the best, you can do, but it's damning. It's damning. It really, I mean, to me, none of this ever, like, everyone says, oh, it wasn't that, because then you get into the problem of semantics, right? And I'm not interested in the semantics. I'm not interested in hearing somebody, Joe Fuckbob's opinion on how a bruised wrist is actually not domestic abuse. I'm not interested in hearing about how, well, I want to know what she did to make him mad. I'm really not interested, to tell you the truth. I know what the facts are. And I know that he committed domestic battery against her and has continued to try and abuse her and gaslight her through courts, through legal action. In fact, he intends to sue her. Think about this. This is really craven. Think about this. She wasn't speaking publicly because she was afraid of this lawsuit that he did actually pull against her of, truthful libel. Meanwhile, he's on his stream yelling at everyone he can find about how he's been framed. His story is just out there constantly. And so under the fear of this lawsuit, she said nothing. Then she wins. And it's proof that she can speak her truth. He then sues her, or plans to sue her again, because he voluntarily removed himself from the Capcom Pro Tour and thus lost out on money. And it's her fault. And he's going to take her to court and get his money back for voluntarily removing himself, which again speaks to Capcom's, ineptitude completely on, enforcing any sort of code of conduct, which there's been multiple examples, but that's the most egregious I can think of, where a guy can be convicted of domestic battery and then they go, well, he's agreed to not come to tournaments, and we just said that's fine.
Well, that was in 2017. I don't know what you're talking. That's not this year. This year is in 2017.
All right. Well, anyways, so the point being that he's continued to gaslight and hurt her through legal action. And she's also talked about how, because her job is to be a reviewer for social media, to promote her reviews and things for social media, she's gotten a lot of harassment from Korean FGC, from his fans, that it makes it very difficult for her to post something without just getting bombed with, shit comments, right? Now, remember, the whole time she was sort of gagged in the sense legally because she couldn't say what she wanted to say. Now she does, and it all becomes crystal clear. All of these lies and obfuscations, they all fall away, right? So he was using that knowledge of suing her while I'm telling everyone that she's this psycho who's trying to ruin my life. Turns out he's not even right. And he even lied about the basic truths of his own case to Panda Global, who then printed that and sort of was like, well, he's going to be fine anyways. It's unbelievely bad. It's the cravenness of something like that.
Well, and just the point that gets to the FGC,
yes,
is that none of this really nothing has actually cut off his access to anything.
No.
I've heard people have that argument of, well, he wasn't able to compete in Capcom Cup. Okay.
Oh, God forbid.
Fine. Like, that's one pro tour that he's not allowed to compete in. He's allowed to stream. He's allowed to have subscribers.
Go to Evo Japan.
He has a new sponsor.
Yep.
Which a stick company out of Korea. Mm-hmm. And so his access is not. Show me the punishment.
Well, his life is ruined, you see.
Has he been canceled?
So
is cancel real? Can it be real?
So I remember being at Evo this year, and I was sitting close to the front row at the Women of the FGC panel, which got a lot of press, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there listening to these women talk about how, because some of them were people who had founded organizations. So you had Samantha Persia Hancock, you had Sherry Jennings, and Carolyn Dow, who have all founded organizations that are kind of primarily focused on female competitors. And, you know, you had Ricky Ortiz up there for the trans women experience. And the point being that all these organizations were pretty much founded because a lot of women felt like they didn't have a good spot to go to when they wanted to just talk about what it was like to be in the FGC as a woman.
To be honest about their experience.
Yes, absolutely. And as I'm sitting there listening to that, I noticed that a couple rows up for me is Tom and Tony Cannon and Shrek, the guy who hands out the medals for you. And they're sitting there and they, you know, they're attending. Your voices are heard. You know, we're proud of this panel. I left that panel. I went to play Samurai Showdown. And as I'm playing in pools, I turn around and look at the big screen. And there up there is Joe, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Versus Infiltration. Right up there on the big screen. And I go, you know what? That's kind of shitty. I'm not going to lie. I don't like that. Then I come back a couple hours later after I've lost, and wouldn't you know it, big old screen. Samurai Showdown champion. Infiltration. There it is, right there. He's showing up on the screen. And I'm kind of thinking, so I just went to a panel where a bunch of women in the FGC explained how they have a difficult time a lot of times, and the reason why they founded these organizations that we all care about so much, apparently, because they felt like their voice wasn't loud enough alone, or they didn't know who to come to talk about their experiences and have a good time. And I see someone who choked his wife, threatened her life, hurt her so bad that she's got tendonitis and that her body is bruised and her clothes were torn off. I see him being grab-handed and hugged by a bunch of these goons. He on Twitter, Evo said that his triumphant return to competition with Samurai Showdown. His triumphant return from what?
Yeah, that was.
Did they say that? Oh, I didn't hear that part.
That was.
I really, you know,
that was my question there at the end.
I didn't. Can you finish that? His triumphant return. What was it? Domestic battery. Oh, okay. Well, you should have mentioned that. That would have been nice to hear. But no. Did they ever offer retraction? Delete the tweet? No, sir. Has Evolution given any statement about the ban against Leia Guilty Hayes? No. Have they talked about that several women were drugged at an after party that they promoted on their Twitter? No. No, they haven't. Which
I will actually say is unrelated to the Guilty situation, because she'll be very vocal about that if we don't say that.
Yeah, it should be clear that there was an allegation that she had drugged someone. That is not true. There are plenty of other founded incidents of abuse you could level against her. That is not one of them.
Correct.
The point being that the biggest tournament in the world is giving a platform to a guy who was in a domestic violent incident. He has shown no remorse. He's actively continued to hurt her through courts, through legal system, by saying that she's rotten on his stream. And the idea then being that when you promote this guy, you're telling a lot of women that you can be a bad person to them specifically. And you know what? It's bad, but you know what? We're here to play. We're here to press buttons. And that's what's really important. Fighting games are something so great.
But he hasn't been mean to me. He hasn't specifically gone out and attacked me. Maybe I'm a woman who's talked to him. He hasn't ever been aggressive or mean to me.
And I'll be very honest. I don't think he is a violent risk at a tournament. Despite that what he, very clearly seems to, have a short temper. I don't think anyone is in danger at a tournament. But, it's a little bit bigger than that. I'm going to use a bad word, ideological even. That I don't think that the FGC as a whole should be a haven for abusive people. I don't think that's a particular shocking take. I think a lot of people would agree with it. Now, the problem comes in actually acting on that and making sure that people who are abusive to other people we don't really want your involvement. And to be frank, if you're going to say, well, she isn't part of the FGC, it's a personal problem. I would again like to direct you to the fact that he directly sued people on a forum, and suing is, you're trying to hurt them. You're trying to hurt them through legal means by, making them pay money and all this stuff. His own local community, because they were voicing their discomfort at the fact that he did something so rotten. If that is an antithetical to the spirit of the FGC togetherness that I've always heard about, I really don't know what is. And if he would do that to people, and because he had the power to do it, he most certainly would do it anywhere. And I think that kind of thing is why I really wish that someone would have the gall, have the stones to just say, in light of this person's behavior, not welcome at my tournament. I'm sorry. Unrepentant abuser, unrepentantly abusive and litigative toward his own scene. Not going to have it.
But they were having a fight. She was hitting him too.
Oh, wow. I'm sure he has, a long hospital stay. It also, first of all, again, that's what we're talking about. This is what you hear. It's always, what did she do to him? Do people understand when they say that? You're telling on yourself what you think about these situations, what you think about women, when they can do something that's so bad they deserve to be choked and dragged around, and it's just as bad. Oh, well, she broke his trophy. Holy shit. My God. His trophy? That probably cost $85 trophy?
But she lied about all the things.
Well, she was never involved in the original leaks. It was a third party. It wasn't her, people. I really don't know what else to say at this point. Now, here's where I give a little bit of leeway. I tend to think if people saw all this in context, they would understand, okay, something's sticky here, and it's not her side so much as his side sounds rotten. However, with the lack of, official, quote unquote official, because I've heard that, is this some Korean rag? Is this InfoWars? You said that jokingly. People have asked me, what's the legitimacy of this paper? As if again, that is what's really important. Did they say that about IGN Korea? No. Veritable journalistic outlet, IGN Korea.
But I disagree with what this one says, so I need to question its veracity.
Yes. Well, so this may be from a more legitimate newspaper. However, I don't like what it says. Therefore, illegitimate. And that is really the crux of where we're at now. The information is there. We've been presented with it. What do you do? And again, I hate to be cynical, because I really don't like to be cynical. But when you look at, let's say, SoCal, where you could throw a dart and there is a player of some renown who has been a jagoff or just said terrible things about women on Twitter, on a stream. I just watched a clip of Wednesday Night Fight High Roll Tournament where we saw Lord Bushin style have a match. If we remember, he was just recently on a stream saying that Sherry Jennings gave hand jobs to her ESL team. And when called out on it, he just said, I don't know, man. On the internet, I'm just a different person. I don't know. He's on the stream. He's a big part. Mike Elna, resident alt-right psycho from SoCal, when he's not talking about how hard men have it and men's rights and the SJWs, he's on stream commentating or playing. He's buddies with a lot of those people. Chris, I think women who wear makeup are insecure. Brent, who apparently has a lot of theories on why females get into the FGC. Just all these, again, Chris G doesn't think, black women really play video games, all this stuff. Again, throw a dart in one of the most popular scenes in the whole community, and you will find someone who's just been terrible about women, whatever. And when you're the leader of that community, and these people keep doing these things, and there's no inaction, there's no pushback.
What I'll say, before you continue, what I will say, instead of using the word terrible, let's instead, because let's be specific, because I feel like giving out general isms like that, or just saying this is bad behavior, is unhelpful and can be twisted. So instead, I will say that they either knowingly or unknowingly hold opinions and have actions and acted upon things which negatively impact minority communities and people.
Let's say that. Okay?
That's so more specific.
They have a history. That scene in particular seems to have something's in the water. They just have a history of constantly repeating these statements that could be just construed in a negative manner toward a minority part of the community, right? And when there's no pushback publicly or otherwise, because that keeps happening magically, shockingly. When Capcom says, well, we know that's bad, but what are you going to do? Through, an iNotes message posted on their official Twitter, you kind of get the sense that, okay, do you kind of agree with infiltration? Because that's what I'm starting to believe. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to. But I'm starting to see it that way. I'm starting to think that you might think, well, you know what? Who among us hasn't had a crazy ex we wanted to hit? Ooh. And if that's the mentality, or even close to that, well, I dare say there's a real deep sociological issue in that case, and maybe that needs to be discussed further. And maybe we should be keeping our people in line instead of yelling at them about instead of yelling on Twitter about how people need to let players make money and you don't know how hard players have it trying to make money. Perhaps we should focus on the issues of, do people feel like they can come, do certain groups in the community feel they can come to our events and feel safe, welcome? And because, again, because of semantics and pedantry, this gets turned into, well, the FGC isn't a safe space. No, you have to be able to withstand a little bit of punishment or a little bit of heat. Now, I would argue that, yes, in a competitive nature, there are people that are going to have high emotions. They're going to get upset. Fair enough. I don't disagree with that. But I really do think that because, and you linked in the show notes one of my articles, which I've kind of talked about how the scene is at the same time not only cyclical or circular in who has the most influence and power it's because it's people from the old days. And we also tend to worship players of renown. Often these are the same people. The ways that you may have handled things in 1995 in a public arcade setting might be a little different with the rise of the internet, a bunch of other things, a Twitch chat and all this other stuff. Now, if you can't update your ways, well, I would say that you may need to find someone who can, or might be willing to, maybe put them in your organization, put them on your staff, and let's take a real stand here. Or we can keep yelling at invisible people on Twitter. It's up to you.
A kind of retort that I want to bring up to what you've said is that I don't actually feel that having a negative and vocal response to all of this stuff, let's say like attacking, if you have listened to this show and you say, I am going to vocally attack infiltration on twitter.com, I actually don't think any of that is beneficial. I mean, it might be what you're feeling, but does that move any real world needle forward? It's one of those things where I don't necessarily know if online outrage matches up with real world impact. Is there a better way to focus your attention or a better way to focus your efforts which might move that needle forward? I don't exactly know what the answer to that is, but it seems to be that continual outrage and just yelling at these people with deep-seated opinions on things which negatively impact, again, minority groups, they will dig deeper into what they have already dug themselves into. So I don't necessarily want to have people listen to this and then go out on an attacking ramp. Like, I don't know if it's the right answer.
So it's probably not constructive. You're right. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people get the wrong idea. You know, you mentioned that, Joe, that people were sharing that clip of Barack Obama giving a recent talk.
Man, it was one of those things where as soon as I saw it, I was like, get ready to see your favorite FGC person retweet this. And
Yes,
sure enough, that happened. Someone who I trust and believe and know is a good and decent human. I was like, there it is, huh?
Well, so here's
there
the
it
thing.
is.
So there is a philosophy called the Vampire's Castle. It's the belief that you structure, you know, if you structure your politics around who fits in the Vampire's Castle and who doesn't, you tend to really just be aggressive and hurtful towards people who may even agree with you, but they don't stand up to a certain purity level, right? This is sort of what Barack Obama is invoking when he's doing that talk about, oh, you know, well, if you say it on Twitter, then it doesn't mean anything. And blah, blah. Now, I agree in politics, which are a really extravagant apparatus that is ancient and dated, and the way it works in this country is particularly bad. But, you know, there are certain things you have to do. Mm-hmm. For Barack Obama, who, for all the good he's done as president, was responsible for mass deportations of immigrants, outing whistleblowers, putting Chelsea Manning in prison, committing long-standing American imperialism in the Middle East, droning people. I would say that it's very convenient for him to tell the younger generation that they are getting a little too loud without doing anything. It makes him look good. It may put him at ease, but he has to deal with his own legacy and how people might view it through a certain ideological lens. That's just politics. So while in politics, I can agree that there are certain elements, because there has to be a strategy to politics. This is a little bit of a different situation. You know, there is no one with an overlasting authority in the FGC. There's no one that can really say, because even if Capcom says you can't be in our tournaments for a year, you could still go to tournaments and just not enter the Street Fighter. It's a very small amount of power we've given over to Capcom or Bandai Namco or whatever corporation is running a world tour. And that's probably a good thing in most situations. However, when it comes to matters of, hey, we need to keep our community free of individuals or things that would be not inclusive, I kind of tend to think, I don't really think they're very effective in that manner, or they haven't been in the past. Now, the other problem is that when you talk about who's getting canceled and all this other stuff, you use the buzzword and you're ignoring any of the nuance in the situation. So yeah, I think it's important.
Big agree on that, because I think we need to define what exactly it means.
Yeah, and again, I don't like to use the word canceled or woke or any stuff, because these are terms appropriated from the black community, used in a different context, in a way different context, and I don't like to use them. So I'm going to use them for quoting, but I'm not going to use them in the actual sense, because what we think it means and what they used it for as a means of social justice means a completely different thing. So when you talk about who's getting canceled, it shouldn't be, okay, so like, what's an example? Just shout out one example of like, oh, this person got canceled in the FGC.
Oh, gosh.
It's a very low barometer, because canceled can mean a million different things.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Here's
Noel Brown.
He's a pretty good example. Okay, so let's take Noel Brown for instance. So Noel Brown has had multiple instances of just outright being violent at tournaments, right? He did at both 8 at the Break and in the hotel of CEO, had violent outbursts. Whether or not they were justified is not the point, right? And then, you know, he did grope someone on a live stream, and that's what really got someone to step in. Combo Breaker actually just said, you're banned for 2 years. And Capcom was like, you're banned for a year. Even Evo said he's banned for our tournament this year. The whole time he mocked the process. He frequently used the hashtag GTAB, which is get that ass banned, which again shows how serious he took the situation. I would say Noel Brown is one of those people who's been around a long time, has just kind of been friends with a lot of people. So he's not really going to get any pushback from the most influential figures in the scene that aren't like TOs and stuff like that, because he's just a long-time player. And when you think about it, what did he get canceled over? It always tends to be, yes, he did this thing that's bad, but at the same time, look at what this person did to him back, which is not, again, not the way. And also, if you remember, when that happened, the CEO thing, when he attacked 2 other people in a hotel room over an incident that I don't feel the need to justify this violence, but when asked for comment from Kotaku, Alex Jabali said that I won't give a comment because this is just out to smear us, and I'm not responsible for anything that doesn't happen at the tournament and it happens in his private time. Now, if that's still his position today, I don't know. But at the time, this is about 2013 or so, 2014. That's the only thing I have to go on as to how some of the most powerful people or more influential people in the scene think about this kind of thing. Well, if it happens in the hotel, it's not my responsibility. Tough, too bad, so sad. And I think that's a really not good thing, because then you get into semantics, because it's not consistent. Okay, well, if it didn't happen at the tournament proper, like in the ballroom, but in the hotel, is that still not the tournament? We just banned, Guilty got a hard ban for a lot of situations that happened sort of outside of the actual tournament. Maybe it had been a bar afterwards, maybe back in a hotel room, and some were in public, sure, but not everything was. OMG, It's Andre, another great example. OMG, It's Andre was finally got the hard ban from a lot of tournaments, not because he defrauded people through credit card schemes in their hotels at Evo, not for, going to prison for said fraud, but because a person said that he had raped her at a tournament. And finally that got the hard ban. Now, it was in the hotel though, so does that mean it wasn't at the tournament and that it's a personal thing? Are we now justifying, okay, well, rape is bad and so you can get banned for that, but domestic violence, it's trickier, so we'll ignore it. You see what I'm saying though, is that when there's no consistency, when it's the Wild West, you get in a lot of situations that ultimately just ends up hurting the people that need to be protected in the first place. And maybe there needs to be a standard. I've always been an advocate. I don't think the system that the Smash community has put in place is perfect by any means, but they have now a code of conduct that a lot of tournaments have signed up for. That is, it just sets the tone. This is what we think, and if you don't abide by these standards, then you're not welcome. And I think at some point, a lot of people say there's a slippery slope about, well, then everyone's going to get background checks. And I think, you know what? I think the only thing we could do as a community is deal with the things that come up, what we find out about. And all it is, it doesn't matter your justifications or, what, if the victim doesn't really want them to go. The reality is you got to look out for the greater sense of the community. And if that means that you got to tell someone, hey, you can't come back for a year, man. You need to take a year off. We're not the police. We can't force you to do anything, and we shouldn't. But you need to come in to think, what we value. And I can't say values anymore because Evo ruined that 100%. They ruined the term. People having core values is just dead. You can't use that term anymore, unfortunately.
It's the most popular. It's the largest fighting game tournament on the planet Earth.
I know, and they ruined it. You just ruined it. So I can't say what is the FTC value, and it won't be memed to death. But I think at some point there needs to be a thought of okay, why don't people come to more tournaments? If people were repulsed, why were they repulsed? And if it is because there are a lot of people who are just unrepentant, just assholes or abusers or whatnot, and they're just competing again and everyone loves them and they're fawned over, and you really got to think about what that message sends out. You may not endorse it. Again, I don't attribute malice to a lot of this stuff. It's just you're not thinking. Let's think about this. Low Tier God was nobody. He was lesser Darkside Phil on YouTube, just an angry man who was making it look like he was going to beat up his girlfriend on stream and just yelling slurs and all this stuff. Then he finally shit talked Vistant, and Alex Valle I just assume, he just, because to him, back in the day, there was a loudmouth who beat one of your friends or whatever, or tried to and failed and just talked a lot of shit. What you do is you make him play in front of everybody and just embarrass him and shame him, right? That was what you did. Well, you did that. And Low Tier God now has been on basic television, cable reality series. He's getting interviewed by esports people. He's a bigger profile than ever. And he does the same shit. Just awful. Just like you said, words, behavior, all this stuff, language that would tend to really hurt minority groups in the community and not so much the most populous groups.
But is that the definition of being canceled? Is someone actually being
no,
canceled?
Because he's not banned from any tournament. What legitimately went through, I assume, Valle's head was that, he's embarrassed and beaten in the game. Now we know he's a scrub and no one will pay attention to him. That's a brutally naive look at how this kind of stuff spreads. That's what I mean when I say, like, when, it's people who are kind of been around for a long time, but they don't pay attention to like those kind of things. Or because I've always said the weird thing about the FGC is that a lot of people just think of it solely as a games hobby thing, and that's it. That's all that matters, right? So you got to focus on the players. But it's what it really, and I've always used the term that because a lot of people use these as vacations. I certainly do. When I go to big tournaments, it's a vacation for me. But a lot of people treat it like they're going to like Candyland or Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory for a weekend, where there is no sense of like strife or sociological, positions of a bunch of people of different values and cultures and ideologies coming together. It's like going to Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. And if you, are a dick to an Oompa Loompa or whatever, well, you're never going to see him again. So what does it matter, Or, this is not what we, I don't care about, the plight of the Oompa Loompa worker. I just care that I want to, be here and eat the chocolate or whatever.
Or that the Oompa Loompa's not getting paid. Or hasn't been for a year at Canada Cup. But just to wrap things around.
Or that person I beat in tournament just got sucked into a tube. All these things. I'm just being silly. But my point is that I don't think a lot of people who have a lot of influence in the scene look at the nature of people and groups getting together and having to share values and all this thing. It's a complicated thing. It requires a certain sensitive touch. But when you're not caring about that, you make mistakes that, again, while they may be small to the biggest groups, they really do hurt the smaller. So I don't know if you read one of my articles where I talked about, with CEO moving to Daytona.
Yeah, I've read them all. I've read that one. That is that is an interesting piece that when I've actually spoken about it on the show before, and it was one of those things where I didn't expect my interest in fighting games to lead me to investigate what homeless people go through or the homeless plight in America and how the police officers vilify that in ways that are really quite disgusting. I didn't realize that my interest in fighting games would lead me to that place.
Certainly not me either. That's the thing. I didn't, it didn't happen that way. It just, I didn't mean to stumble into all this, but it just happened,
and yet, that's where we are, at least it's one of those things worth looking at. But at the same time, a lot of the people who, I don't want to generalize and say a lot of people.
Let's be careful here. Let me take it back. So when I brought up my two friends at the beginning, Amanda and Stephanie, my point was that I started to think of how, intersectionality and all those things, because I met people who fit into those minority groups, listened to their experience and thought, well, you know what, I'm having a good time. But at the same time, there's a lot of things I start to notice when they tell me things that I see that this could probably be fixed if someone paid enough attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a very big voice. I can only apparently yell on podcasts. That's all I can do, and yell on Twitter. But that's all I can do, because I really can just hope that people look at these things and realize that this is people. This is the people business. This isn't just the business of technocratic meritocracy of people playing games and, well, the better champion wins.
That's the other side. That's the whole sticking point, though, is that this community is often at least in the places that it is making money and marketed as, it is viewed as a meritocracy, and it is treated that way, even though a lot of the ways that these gears turn, it is certainly not that. Like what's going behind the scenes is 100% not a meritocracy, even though we would like to believe that it would be.
Just what I said. Low Tier God was on like a major reality show to push his skill as a Street Fighter V player. Again, it's not. This is why I've railed against esports, because it's not that I hate the money, because a lot of people accuse you of that, right? Like Richard Lewis, everybody's favorite, right? An alleged journalist who likes to call people mentally ill. He was the host of the E-League show for a while, and he made a real ass of himself just yelling at people on Twitter about how the FGC will always stay small because you hold back your own players, right? Now, everyone looked at that and said that was garbage. My heart has never been more full. The cockles of my heart just warmed over when I saw all these people just rise up against Richard Lewis. When Sonic Fox, when they went after Richard Lewis just hardcore, I was like, God, they're the greatest, you know? I can't wait. What they did was so great.
And what the kind of the back end of that, just if people don't know, if you are listening to this show and you're on Twitter, the chances are you're probably blocked by Richard Lewis. Trust me, I don't know why or how this has been. I'm blocked.
It's probably because you can get like a block bot, and anyone who's like vaguely FGC associated, you can just block them by looking up certain keywords. You know,
I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And
absolutely, yeah. Wasn't personal.
Never interact with him in one iota on that on the bird site. And guess what?
Yeah, so
blocked.
Exactly, and me too. And well, I've yelled at him. Not I've yelled at him. So me getting blocked is really not that shocking. But I saw a lot of people talking about how they got blocked, and I think.
And I'm sure he's weaponized his followers against you. That's probably no surprise.
Oh, I got people calling me mentally ill and fat, and all this other kind of stuff. I had a guy the other day tell me that I needed to stop thinking about my abused mother when I talk about infiltration. Just the worst reply guys, the mutants on Twitter.
Honestly, I don't even want to get into that, because the
I'm sure as having a major stream or being on Reddit in general,
the moderators of Reddit see the things that get auto filtered out for us to go like, oh no, that needs to be deleted immediately is some of the most disgusting, heinous shit. The leaps in logic that people go through just to hold on to some form of hatred for. Maybe I'm vamping today because I specifically saw one thing today that really just it made me lose faith in humanity in a lot of ways. Where I'm how could you even what kind of person says a thing like this?
And this is the Twitch chats too. I've talked about that, where it's just no one really cares about the Twitch chat. And when someone tells you, I don't really want to play on stream because I'm afraid of what the people in the Twitch chat will say. And they'll just go, well, they're invisible. What do you care about?
Is that our responsibility as a community?
Well, here's the thing. I would at least say modding the chat, make sure you can do what you can, but also just understand that that's a valid response, and that this is not the snowflakes not handling being bad, because that's, again, when you think of it in a technocratic meritocracy sense, all your arguments default to, well, they're bad, so what does it matter? Again, with the low tier God thing, well, he was bad and made fun of because he was bad, so he'll never be relevant again. That's not how it works. That's so not how it works. And if you think of it in that very myopic sense, you're going to keep having situations like that. So when we talk about people on, so back to my Richard Lewis thing, the point, that's a guy who was just fundamentally talking about his view of esports and what I think esports is in general, which is a nickel and dime business that that only a few people are really going to make money, and that's what matters, and you should support them because making money is good and right. And how dare you hold down these people? And to be honest, Richard Lewis says it, and he's a huge dick. But I kind of don't fundamentally see the difference between when he says that and when Alex Valle scolds everyone for not saying for making fun of people who desperately try to monetize like every instance and want the smaller tournaments and all that stuff. And how dare you talk about how they make money? How dare you? They're players, they're people too. And it's like, okay, well, he's not as much of a dick, and he's got way more upsides than Richard Lewis. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, the whole thing about esports is we're going to give money to people who are going to make money that they can live on is very, very few, propped up by a business founded on false statistics.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even gotten into that yet, but that's
also
on the docket.
A quick aside, someone pointed out that the Street Fighter League was like view botted to hell. Like the view counts were going, I think it was Majin Obama. Yes. The view counts were going nuts. And go ahead.
As a point to that, a lot of those views come from embedded viewings, which they take out a lot of ads on a lot of websites where
on the Street Fighter wiki. Example.
Yeah, and if anyone has that up, that is also counted as a view. So it's like it's in so many places all at once that it's kind of hard to avoid. So does that boost numbers? Probably. Does it boost it enough to say that there are not view bots?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so here's the reality. And there's a very great article on Kotaku by Cecilia D'Anastasio, who to me, there's a quick plug for her work. She's one of the best in the business, in my opinion, as far as writing about esports and writing about what it actually means in a business sense.
Right.
She did a long article talking about how Gamepedia, which makes a lot of those wikis, that's the company that makes those wikis that have the ads on them, that's owned by Twitch. Okay, so Twitch is knowingly buying ad space through their own websites to promote streams that, maybe a company pays them to help promote. And, the problem with digital marketing is a lot of it is hoo-ha. A lot of it. Facebook just last week lost a lawsuit where they had inflated their metrics by 900%.
Which if you don't know what that means, that's a fuck ton of bringing that to sell that to anyone. If you see something inflated to 900% of views of people who are actually not engaging with your product whatsoever, the Gfinity disappears is what happens.
Yes. Gizmodo disappears. GeoMedia closes Deadspin because the numbers aren't right.
Oh, gee,
and you know why the numbers aren't right? Because they're not real. It's not real, and that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. Is it's propped up on a nickels and on a house of cards that barely works.
Right.
So when I rail against esports, it's not against people making money necessarily. It's against the idea that this very weak house of cards is getting propped up to put a few people to really make money, and everyone else just has to fall in line and support them because the greatest goal is to someone make money. They prey on your loyalty. They prey on your fandom. And I think that's so wrong. It's so antithetical, again, I think, to people who grew up and, went to arcades or went to the bodegas to play fighting games with friends when they couldn't, be at home. It's more than just a fandom. It's more than just, something to give your money to. We didn't care that Capcom ate all our quarters when we were trying to beat Bison in Street Fighter 2, right? What we cared about was the people that we played with and we kept seeing to play to. But when you grow up in that industry where, okay, anyone who's not playing at the machine or is bad, we don't care about. As a human being, we just can't. You start to lose sight of the humanity of it all. And I think a lot of times that ends up happening. Again, I don't attribute it to malice. I just think that you don't think about these things, but it does hurt people. And I can't, listening to people tell me their stories. I've heard a lot of people tell me a lot of stories about, the things they've run into and that nobody would listen to them. They didn't feel they had a voice, so they just left and they never played again. And a lot of people would say, well, if you can't handle it, don't, if you can't handle the heat, don't get in the kitchen. I just think that's wrong. I just think it's wrong.
I think that if you take anything away from the show, which hopefully that you have, the listener.
Hopefully, or else I've been yelling a lot for no reason.
Another thing that just a little word of advice. If you happen to disagree with the majority of the things said on this show, that is your prerogative. That's fine. But I would say if you disagree with it, then you should follow and start listening to people who don't look like you.
Absolutely.
Just look at if you're on Twitter, look at your Twitter follows. and try to even out the number of people whom you follow. Just
curate your online experience.
Think about it for a minute of like how much of the people that I follow look exactly like me.
Sure.
And should I
share
start
the same values as me? Have the same ideology as me?
Yeah, should I even like reach out, because there's people that I'm sure have a different opinion than you, and that their viewpoints are valid from their own perspective that you might not know exists at all. Right. That could be you, listener, and
it could be. And a lot of people would accuse someone like me of just being in it for the clout. I've certainly, Mike El Nas called me a clout chaser. A lot of these things, and
you're just doing it because you hate infiltration.
Yeah, this person I've never met before who, he did no crimes, so how could I hate him? And
which,
hate
is kind of another thing, because I don't hate the guy. I just want the information to be out there and truthful.
I don't think he should go, because a lot of people take it to the level of, well, he should be in prison and blah. And again, in prison, think about what you're saying here.
We care about it. Yeah,
it's not about the again, because a lot of people think, well, when will you be satisfied? Because again, and that's the way a lot of people apologize too. Whose ass didn't I kiss? That's the way they take it. Okay, I did the song and dance. What do you want from me? And it's because people have to keep going. You didn't change. You haven't. Every time you get canceled, quote unquote, you don't change. You just go, well, it's cancel culture, and that's I don't subscribe to that.
I'm sorry you were offended.
What does that even mean? I don't subscribe to cancel culture. I don't know what that means.
The crazy part is that shit works.
I know. A lot of people
I don't know why.
Hell yeah, I'm not about cancel culture either. Blah blah blah. Which we're talking about real things that happen to real people.
I don't know.
You can't just go, well, I don't subscribe to that, particular thing that happens to a bunch of people, so it's whatever.
And at the same time, a lot of the people who are quote unquote canceled do not lose access to any kind of power or any kind of influence. It's Absolutely all still not. There. I still see guilty being retweeted by people who I love and care about. And I'm well, okay, fucking why? Why are we doing this?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing too is again, if there was someone who legitimately was man, they really did change. I just had this example the other day. I was on Twitter yelling at some reply guy because they just weren't. You could post the link to the threads I've done about infiltration as much as they want. They kept saying, "Oh, it's all hooey and just cancel. Everyone wants to get canceled." Blah blah. Finally, he looked into it and was like, "Oh my god, I'm going to change my." He deleted the tweet and was just like, "I'm sorry to those people I've offended." And I said, he gave an apology. I'm not going to bug him anymore. Because that's literally all I can ask, is that you look at what we're talking about, say, you know what, that's valid. And I actually you don't have to agree with me in the sense of fully fall over to what I'm saying, but just to go I hadn't thought about it that way. I'll think about it again in the future. And then you have to stick to it too. That's the other thing. It might be nice in the moment, but if you don't stick to it, for example, when someone when Chris G said that thing about black women, which was bad, his apology was also bad. He goes, first of all, I just want to say that I'm tired of people with agendas, but looking back, some of the stuff I said was probably dumb and I shouldn't have said it, which is a whopper of an apology, by the way. That's really to the heart. And so he continued to get called out on it. And then he did a stream where he was he did what I just talked about. Whose ass didn't I kiss? What more do you want from me? People just want to cancel me, blah, blah, blah. And he's yelling at women in the chat who won't take his apology. And again, you have to think, okay, this whole thing was about this one thing, and you haven't changed at all. And also, when you're saying you've been canceled and blah, 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 and right below your face is the EG logo because you are sponsored by evil geniuses, it kind of rings hollow. I'm just going to say, it rings a little hollow. So, and again, it's not like tomorrow he couldn't just be like, well, you know what? I hadn't thought of that. I'll you know what? Apology. Never do it again. And, it goes by and nothing happens. And you're like, well, you know what? Because I'll give a lot of props to Logan Sama, who was someone I was like, dude, man, this dude just sucks. He just constantly couldn't keep his foot out of his mouth and just a bunch of stuff. And then, you know what, it kind of just stopped. And he made a point to mention, like, someone finally close to me. It took someone close to him saying, you got to stop this. It's a big problem, for him to stop it. And if that's what it took, I can't be mad that, you know, if it wasn't because he realized that this was a mean thing to do on his own, I can't be mad, because at least it changed, and it has changed. You haven't heard of me.
I think that is a good example to share, because I know that I've said, like, those exact words, I believe, of how to. Here's the thing: if someone is mean like that, like, I don't have influence on the people who are personal in your life. It's those conversations are actually like really tough to have. I've had that conversation. I have a friend who, let's say this. Okay, so I have a friend who has also committed domestic violence, and I've had that very difficult conversation of, like, this is what the people around you think of you now because you did this thing. You need to seriously consider what that means and how your relationship with people have changed because of what you've done. And in the future, like, you kind of have to change because of that. You cannot continue this way.
Stick to it. My bad, or I'm sorry you were offended in the moment. It might sound like an apology, but if you don't actually change, then what was the point?
Right.
And so, you know, if you can say, well, I've talked to so-and-so about saying things about women on Twitter and he won't do it anymore, then he just keeps doing it. Or, you know, so, and again, maybe it's bad in a sense of, like, don't leak what, like, people are saying in private chats, but, like, when someone points out in a private chat they're still doing it, and it just becomes public knowledge, it's like, okay, then again, the person didn't really change it. If you're doing it performatively, and it's expected to be like, well, that's good enough, right? I only see you once a week. Again, that whole Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory Candyland analogy. That's not. You're dealing with people with real feelings, and it doesn't just over a weekend. They just, oh well, we stopped thinking about things for a weekend, and it's fine, or a night, or whatever. Like, it's just not how it works, man. It's just not how it works. And people will get uncomfortable and won't want to go to events. And it might be a small number. Like, the FGC isn't going to die because this behavior doesn't change, because it's a small community anyways.
Not. Yeah.
But I
this
think
doesn't affect our bottom line.
You'll lose more people. What bottom line? There's not even money to be made. So it's like, who's affected? So the problem is, if you think of it like that, you don't know how many people you'll lose, because you will never know. And if we could be, because I loathe to think that the whole structure of the FGC, one of its core values, damn it, one of its core values.
You said it.
One of its core values is exclusion, I think. Because you know how many people from, like, the olden days will talk about how, like, oh, we didn't like newcomers until they showed up every week to get beat and smiled about it. That kind of states, like, right away, like, well, if you were new and started playing and you weren't good, I didn't like you because you wasted my time. And it's like, okay, that is exactly why people don't come and play, because they feel like they're the other or the outsider coming in and
in 2019, with so many things begging for our attention and doing a good job of grasping our attention, it is so easy to dismiss this community. It's so easy.
It really, I mean, yeah, and they'll feel bad about it, but you know what? They'll find a community that really speaks to them eventually, whether it is, you know, whatever it might be, some other enthusiast community. Yeah. But why can't it be ours? And it's because when people who have a lot influential voices aren't keeping each other in check or letting them slide because they're their friend. And you and me, Joe, you and I both know, as men, we fall into this thing where we get told things that we know are just, hey, you know, men think this, and it's really bad, you know, might be really insensitive, maybe discussing things about women or maybe someone that doesn't look like us, and we're just supposed to nod and go, yep, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That is literally you've described my workplace of people making jokes around me and in front of people where I legitimately just dead stare them in the eye. I do not laugh because they expect me to laugh at their bad joke. Yeah. And I'm nope.
And you're grasping your leg and like, God,
no, I mean, I've like literally fought people on that. Like I've had one person say like, right now it's harder for a white man to get into college than any other group. And I'm like, hey, my guy, I'm pretty sure that's not true. Like you just need, and he's like, and then he literally didn't have a response to that. He was like, and I'm like, you want me to confirm your bias. I'm not here for it, my guy. Like you picked the wrong fight here.
And the thing is, it's just, this is what's the truth. If you don't agree with this thing that's going on, when it happens close to you and you're just complicit, and you just don't say anything and you're neutral, that's complicity. That's letting the people who could stand to lose the most will lose the most, and not the person who may not. Because if you just wait for it to happen through some other means, it's not going to happen.
Tanner, let's not be political here. Let's never talk about politics.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize for my
because that is having no stance is a stance. Like to be clear,
yeah,
like,
it is. Like I said, it's with the PG thing. Well, we were trying to be neutral and legal about it. Well, you took a stance. And a lot of people now think that there's this revenge plot, of old boy level conspiracy against infiltration. It's just like, come on. Like, it's because now, again, you don't have to say, if you're a professional organization, I don't expect you to write, like in writing, infiltration is a bad person and I never want to do business with them. But you can just say the facts. Infiltration committed domestic battery. We don't support that. He's got to go. If you don't say that, if you say, well, there was definitely an altercation of something that happened or that may or may not have happened, and based on that ruling, we've decided that we may not work professionally with him anymore.
And there were definitely lies committed by a third party on this issue.
Well, or one of the main parties was lying to us most of the time that we couldn't, because we're not, legal counsel, we're not professionals. We couldn't get this information that would have proven the lie. We just weren't.
And legally speaking, they had to like protect their company as well, and like all of that. I think listen, every company does this. Like I was a little bit flippant about this with Evo, and that they have not said anything about the number of druggings that happened in and around the after parties at Evo.
Here's what I understand.
Total sense they haven't said anything.
I understand you can't say names. You don't want to do any of that. But as Joe, as I've looked into what it means to put together a code of conduct, there's another person I want to shout out. A person by the name of Joyce, who goes by Logic Hole on Twitter. She's worked for a lot of tournaments in a behind the scenes. She actually worked at Evo behind the scenes for the finals day and a lot of other production stuff. So she's done a lot of stuff in the FGC, especially like in Smash and other stuff. She's very interested in like codes of conduct and how that works. And she actually linked a great free resource that is put together by several professionals who work with companies to put together a code of conduct and all this other stuff. And it's, it has a lot of good examples of what transparency looks like when you're, a big company trying to be professional. And it's not like a 4 to 5 page document listing out every allegation. It's this thing happened with this person. This person did this. This is against the code of conduct. Therefore they are gone. And that's all. It's all you need. When you muddle it with, well, but then also she actually didn't fear for her life because she called him and he came to argue about their divorce. So when you leave, and like because they imply that if infiltration was going there to get a divorce and she didn't let him, now she's the bad person because she wouldn't divorce him. You don't mean to say that, but that's when you have to go, well, here, let's be honest about why they were meeting. It's like, okay, but what does that have to do with the end effect of this thing happened? Does it matter? No, it doesn't.
And you kind of have to house this whole thing. We're talking about the video game industry, where one of the largest companies, Blizzard, has had a whole kerfuffle about immediately banning and stripping the money away from the Hearthstone player because of things
who had a political ideology.
Who had a political ideology and then have since walked back on a lot of those things.
Because
and then
people yelled at him.
because people yelled at them, but they also were not open and honest about why the ban happened in the first place, and like completely denied the actual reason why it fucking happened. And then you just had BlizzCon, and guess what? People are fucking like, how do I restore my Blizzard account?
Well, I mean, that's
hopefully I can get my skins back, because I deleted it because of the Hong Kong stuff. But I'd like to get it back now, please. Fucking come on.
Yeah, I mean, and look, here's the thing. If it's against their code of conduct to have political ideology said on stream, you know what? If he gets, you may disagree with it, but you know what? As a transparency report, if they just said that, I would be fine. You know, I wouldn't like it,
if they had
but
said
I'd be
that.
like, okay, I don't like it.
We're true about that, like for all of the rulings for everything, right?
Yes, but and I am like, if you sincerely have in the code of conduct, we don't want people to say inflammatory things, you know, on stream. Okay, fine. At the same time, you have to realize how that comes across, especially, you know, in context, in the situation. And like you said, in the video game industry, where even the biggest esports companies like Riot sounds like a hive of just the worst behavior towards women and how women are treated and promoted within the organization. Actually had a walkout, you know, this year over it. Went to court over
collective barging and all that shit, man.
It's again,
how they treat their workers as well.
So this isn't issue. Just this is a whole thing of like, in gaming culture is just kind of rotten at some points. And it's not just the FGC. I know a lot of people like to use that argument. Well, it's not just the FGC, but it's, you know, appeal to authority. You know, it's an appeal to.
I think that's a good point to kind of end on with this whole thing. Is that I know that anytime this comes up, anytime I say anything or speak out against something that is bad about the community, and I say that as a all-encompassing capital C community. Anytime anyone says this is bad about us, we need to reflect on this, it is immediately struck with any number of people saying, no, man, that's fucking weird. That ain't us. That's not us. That part is not us. That's not what the community is. Where it's just, no, this is part of it. Like, we have to be honest about these things. Because
if you want to clarify, like, again, people have said, well, who among, like, what does the FGC mean? What does it mean to be a part of it? And people have clarified, people in power who go, or who have influence, I should say, because there's, you know, ultimately it's a very small community. So when you say people of influence who go, well, if you know, watch the streams and you play online, you're part of the community. Well, that part's pretty rotten for a lot of people. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
And you're not doing a lot. All you do is just go, well, we don't subscribe to that and we don't agree with it and blah, blah, blah. But then it also, that kind of stuff ends up showing up at tournaments. And just because people aren't talking about it, or you personally as a person of influence didn't hear it, doesn't mean it's not happening. So when people are quote unquote getting canceled, maybe you should look at who's saying it and what would they have to gain. Again, because a lot of the arguments could just be said, what do they have to gain by saying this? Because it's the old example of victim blaming that people have done for years. What is the person who was abused or whatever, what would they have to gain? Like with infiltration, he's made it clear that he doesn't have like the most money in the world. He could barely afford a lawyer. What does she have to gain by saying that he hurt her? Like, what is she going to put him in jail? No, apparently that's not, he got the smallest fine possible. What is there to gain by, you know, saying that he abused her other than, and again, if people say, well, she gets the clout, is the clout really worth, again, you know, what you invite, which is mass harassment via social media.
Yeah.
All this other stuff. Why would someone just make that up unless, again, like actual false reports tend to be, they're actual just criminals in many other ways, and this lie is just one of them. It doesn't make any sense, and I wish people would think about that kind of thing when they look at these accusations, or when people says, you know, hey, this thing happened, and I wish someone would do something about it. Hey, maybe you look at that and go, because I've seen some great examples. You know, Jabali, I just blew him up for a little bit, but I'm going to give him some props. When that person said, what do you do to nestmaids? And he posted a gun.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately, Jabali was like, you are not coming to my tournament. I'm refunding you. We don't want you here. That is not cool. We're not making jokes like that. And that was awesome. That was like, wow.
It was swift. It was,
Yeah.
we have found this person. We know who you are.
Yeah.
Like, you're
That's,
done.
you know, and that's someone, you know, that's again threatening violence. That's in a very, and again, a thing that could actually happen. You know, it's not a joke anymore. And I just wish we treated that level of it's not a joke to the things that we then do, like Jabali makes an attack helicopter joke in his official rules. That hurts trans people. I'm sorry. It does. Trans women face just really trans people in general. I shouldn't even say trans women. Trans men, non-binary people. A non-binary person is one of the biggest figures in our scene. They get so much hate over who they are by both the state, as in like the United States, and, you know, just general society, that I think we should really look at, okay, we want to be inclusive and get people to play. And frankly, there's a lot of people who fall under the LGBTQ banner who might be neurodivergent, they're not neurotypical, who find solace in this community because it's a thing they like. They go into the Discord, they come to the tournament, and they can hang out. They can go to Combo Queens. They can
be themselves. They can
be
feel
who
accepted.
they really want to be, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of people like that. And when you do things like that, it may not cause mass violence immediately, or it may not be apparent what you're doing, but these things matter. And when you want to represent a community, you can't let that kind of stuff slide. You just can't. You have to really take a stance and go, this is not what we are part of as a community. We have these values. Damn it, I did it again. We have these values that we hold. Now, if, again, because it's the Wild West, we don't have a centralized thing, someone's got to stand up and probably at one point go, can we figure out what our values are so we can start cracking down on some of this stuff?
Well, yeah, because
it's going to be
needing someone in power to say, I care about this. This is why we're doing this. And hopefully I can get other people to ascribe to this same ideal because I feel like this is important and it affects this group of people. This is why. You're
disproportionately.
Right,
disproportionately. And if the biggest tournament in the world is just going to be silent forever because it'll be a PR move, it's a PR disaster.
Yeah.
Then I would say that I sincerely would doubt your long-term commitments to making sure you're creating an inclusive space. And by inclusive, I don't mean no one can say anything, because that's what a lot of people like to say. Well, you can't say anything nowadays. And you'll get canceled or whatever. And it's really not about that. What it is that when you create situations that would make it uncomfortable for a whole group of people to not show up, we as a community, you go, well, we want people to come. And if people aren't coming because of, one fucking jerk, we don't even agree with it anyways, then we know what to do. Now, again, people get emotional in fighting games and there's a lot of shit talk, but the shit talk is also a lot of times in a camaraderie sense. I've seen a lot of people getting really they are just going at each other and playing and all this stuff. It's done in a joking or we're having fun with each other method. People know the difference. Again, we treat people like who they would never know. Like, oh, you don't know the difference between, good old shit talking and someone actually being mean to you. We treat these people who have honest grievances like they're babies. Maybe we should treat them like adults. Maybe we should treat them like people with agency who really know what's happened. They really know what happened to them and they really believe it, and not just think it's an afterthought.
Yeah, much agreed with it. I actually didn't realize about that attack helicopter thing in the actual official ruling.
He got rid of it. He did get rid of it when people brought it to his attention, but I've always, because
I was going to say that's like the one joke. It's the one joke anyone has ever said.
Oh, y'all got one joke. We know that. Yeah, it's one joke,
and it's one, not funny.
Yeah,
and the two shows
just mean
your whole. It's your whole ass is right there.
Yeah.
Your whole ass.
It's just mean, and again, I'm props to saying, hey, that was a mistake. We'll take it down.
Yes.
But it wouldn't have happened if people didn't yell at you. So I would like, again, if you're getting, when I say yelled at too, it's like no one's posting in all caps. They just might be, a little rude about it. If that's what's keeping you from making change, then I would suggest you stop calling people snowflakes or whatever, because you're the one who's really mad that someone got offended by what you said. They're mad because it actually hurt them in a way, and you're just mad that they let you know. So when you think about it like that,
there.
Yeah, no one ever got anything done without actually again, they'll yell at you for a while, but if it actually changes, we're all going to work together anyways.
And also, them yelling at you doesn't prevent you from actually running your big event. It doesn't stop the event from...
You're not canceled.
No, you're still going. The event will run. Evo will still happen, regardless of how many people are angry about Evo.
Yeah, there's way too much. Yeah, there's way too much money tied up in this thing.
Canada Cup will still be a premier event, regardless of top 8 not being streamed.
Or streamed or paid,
or people being paid even a year after the event has already occurred. Like it's.
Yeah, so like we know that these biases and these sort of like unfair situations exist. So why do we need to be coy about it and not just, if someone's yelling at you about something being unfair, just go, you know what? Yeah, you're right. There is a double standard. And once we all can agree that there's a double standard, we can then come to a solution maybe about how to fix that. But until then, we're going to run into these issues. Somebody's going to get yelled at.
All right. Well, I think that's where we need to leave things, but I cannot.
People got to be sick of me. Really, I've ruined our Street Fighter. Probably
you've ruined the show. I
know.
You've ruined.
I've killed. Trust me, I've had podcasts of my own. I've killed them all. So trust me, I know that I run these things into the ground.
You've canceled my show.
I have. I'm a real Charlie Brown.
Unfortunately, but before you leave, before this show stops running forever and I get sued into oblivion,
I'm sorry,
I need 2 things from you.
Okay.
Actually, 3 things, but we're not on the 3rd thing yet. I have 2 specific things that I need from you.
Okay.
The first is I need to hear from you, what is your favorite normal attack in any fighting game? Because I feel like the way that people answer this question can really open up about their character or how they approach fighting games or the mentality about being competitive. So in that light, what is your favorite normal attack in fighting games?
Okay, well, he's had it in almost every appearance he's had. But the best iteration is Fei Long's close standing hard punch in Super Turbo or Super Street Fighter. I mean, that thing, plus on block, comes out super fast. Every time you do it, he goes, wah! It's the coolest move ever. Like, it just does everything. Cancels into Rekkas. It's awesome. It's just that you feel almighty when that thing... I played ST against a guy named Nick I roomed with at Combo Breaker. I haven't played in a while. Playing Fei Long and just doing that move, warmed the cockles in my heart, man. Flame kicked my heart right up. It's just an awesome move. Awesome move. Just does it all. You get close, you do that move. Anti-air, it's a good meaty. It's plus on block. You're going in the throw. You're going into Rekka, whatever. Combos after chicken wing. It's amazing. Close fierce. Love it. Street Fighter 4 did a disservice to that move, unfortunately.
Yeah, you kind of have to work your way around. It's more like stand medium punch in that one.
It's a punish move, but it's not the almighty, like, I got close and I'm using this move only.
Right. When you do get the punish with it, it can lead into some really awesome stuff, man. Fei Long in that game, fucking
absolutely,
awesome.
Yeah. I'm not decrying his tier position in Street Fighter 4. I'm just saying it's just that move in particular was not. It's not the move. It was not
what it was.
No, sir.
Which is a whole other issue of people talking about future iterations of games and being like, it's not even a Street Fighter. It's not a Guilty Gear.
Is it really Street Fighter if Close Fierce isn't good? I don't think so.
All right. Well,
I'm canceling Street Fighter, to be honest. It's
in addition to that, though, kind of on top of that, what is your favorite combo in any fighting game?
Well, there's a lot of great responses you could give. I think, though, mine has to be Cyrax's MK9 bomb trap. Now, I say trap. I say trap because that would imply there's a way out through many situations, and there's not. You either break or you die. So Cyrax and MK9 is a really funny little game that was it's the same style of old Midway games where it's just like, what were they thinking? Oh, they weren't. So they just made a game. So, these things just happen and it's wacky. It was a lot less wacky than everything that came before it, but nonetheless, really strange. And one of the things was Cyrax was an amazing character, not only because he had great, normal moves, not only because he had great anti-air, not only good projectile and stuff. When he hit you, he always comboed into his net move. Now, in NRS games have that, everybody has like a capture state move where you land for combos. Everybody has that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Cyrax would do that, Then he would jump in, punch you, do 2 more hits, and do enhanced bomb, which was like a missile that went to your chest and you exploded. And while he did that, he would shoot another bomb from his chest, the regular bomb, behind you. And you were bounced up so high from the other one that he would do more hits. So he'd do another couple hits into net again. Now, when the net hits you again in the air, you still go back on the ground, but you're not captured. You just kind of fall out of it. The problem is his bomb is unblockable. So he just does a move into the bomb, and you land in it. And then he does back one, which is this other launcher. And then he does it again. And he repeats it, and you lose like 70% from this. Like if he hits you once and you don't have the meter to break, you're losing like 65 to 70% if you don't drop it.
Because you're you're locked in.
Yes. So they call it a trap. There's really only one way out. And in the grave or with breaker. So that was like the litmus test for MK9. You either got hit by that move and thought, this is the biggest piece of shit game I've ever played in my life. I'm never playing this again. NRS sucks. I will never play another title. And to be fair, there's a lot of people like that. Or you got hit by it and go, that's so silly. I'm going to play these games the rest of my life. There's no in between. There's no one who's like, you know what? I don't agree with this design, but you know what? It's fine that I get hit by it. It's either or. You're either a lifer or you just hate it forever.
You want to subject people to the bullshit, or you can't handle the bullshit.
Absolutely. MK9 was that kind of polarizing, and we loved it for it. There'll never be another game like it. Much again as I don't like that people hold on to it as this gold standard, you have to admit it was a fun game while it lasted, and the bomb trap is like a perfect example of why it was so goofy.
Silly games, man. All right, that's a good answer. And I think that will wrap up the show. So kind of a long episode this week, so thank you for sticking around. If you've listened to the full two...
It's a long one, and it's a heavy episode. So again, we want to mention that if you don't want to hear about violent crime against women, violence against people of other, different ideological backgrounds or different sexualities or genders or anything like that, please feel free to just, skip it. But I think it's important to talk about, and I really wish more people did. That's the only reason I'm on here. I hope somebody got something out of it. I know I said when I sat down that I'm comfortable and furious. Hope I didn't alienate too many people. I swear I'm nicer in person.
All right. Well, where could people direct their anger on the internet? If you want to be a reply guy and yell at me, which again I'm sort of used to at this point, you can follow me at KingHippo42. And my website where I post blogs, which hasn't been updated in a while. To be honest, I've just been playing Fire Emblem. That's just the truth. It's Them's Fighting Words with 2 exclamation marks at blogpress.com or at blogpress.blogpress.com, wordpress.com. I'm sorry, wordpress.com. And you can find my blog post there. And again, on Twitter, hang on a second. And these will be linked in the show notes also.
They will be linked in the show notes. Now, this is my brand. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, just remember, post Persona and Sailor Moon shitpost memes and clips. Long-winded, full 240 character rant. Like I'm beyond 180. When it was 180, I just moved on to 240. Full 240 character rants about whatever happens to be on my mind at the moment. And the third one, which I've since crossed out, but I think what I said at the beginning was that it was gosh, I don't even remember. So I guess you can follow me for those two things. And if you want to hear me get mad about politics or something, you can follow me on that. I've been told I pull good GIFs and clips. So, hey, that's something to look forward to. That's a skill that I can market, I'm sure. So, that's my brand, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Beatles brand. Well, that was also,
that was the thing.
That was the number 3.
Fawning, getting weepy about the Beatles.
The number 1 was your number 3. All right, folks. That is a show. You can find me at Super Joe Mundo or at RedditSF on Twitter.com, or hop onto our Street Fighter and make some posts. So try and be nice, try and be civil to each other, please. It just makes my job much harder if you're not. Don't forget about the tournaments on Mondays and Fridays. And of course, we will see you every Thursday with this episodes of RSF Radio. So until next week, folks, take care. But until then, be good to each other, please, for everyone's sake.
Good games. Have fun. Come on, let's go.
Cheers. Peace.
Yeah.
And also, Tanner, again, thank you very much for coming on the show and speaking at length about the things that you are passionate about. It has been a pleasure to hear what you have to say. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I appreciate anybody that gives me the time to do this. Again, I know it's a lot, but I hope it sparks a conversation. Hopefully a nice one. Probably.
All right, folks. Till next time, take care. Peace.